Debate about liturgy and music in the Catholic Church has been so hysterical for so long that it's hard to find anything new to say about it. But every now and then, something refreshing will break through and provide a measure of lucidity in a way that the well-rehearsed debates often don't. And for me, that came recently when I was recommended a YouTube reaction video that featured what are described as like tribal villagers from India. I guess the premise of the channel is that these people live in a quaint and remote way from the world, and so their reactions to like cultural works or videos or music is as innocent and as honest as you could ask for. And in one particular video, they listened to Allegri's Miserere, which is a 17th century sacred polyphony composition. Polyphony, if you don't know, is a style of music that combines like multiple melodies simultaneously. So traditionally, like Gregorian Chant has one melody, but then when you layer it with multiple, it becomes polyphony. And this particular song has both. And frankly, I think it's indisputably one of the most beautiful works of Christian art ever made. But of course, that could just be my Eurocentrism rearing its ugly head. That might just be my Christian supremacist attitude or my traditional presuppositions. After all, I'm an Orthodox Catholic. These are the kinds of arguments I hear over and over again whenever I address the topic of sacred music in the Catholic Church. The claim here, I think, is that Gregorian chant is a European style of music that shouldn't be given any more primacy in the life of the church's worship than like any other style. To insist otherwise is something like cultural intolerance or even bigotry, akin to colonial, if not white, or at least European supremacy. But as I've tried to argue many times, and as the church has clearly taught, sacred music is not arbitrary. There are better forms of music that more closely align with standards the church has defined in her official doctrinal teachings. And yes, God does care about what forms of music we use to worship him. Because different kinds of music have different kinds of effects on us. Some make us sad, some make us happy, some make us reflective, some make us like anxious or excited. Some have a calming influence, while others stir up our emotions to an uncontrollable pitch. And as you might guess, some of those effects, and therefore the music that causes those effects, are more appropriate for prayer. And God simply wants us to better perform prayer so that we can be best predisposed to his presence and his sanctifying grace. So yes, God cares about the music that we listen to, and especially the kind of music we employ in worship. Further, some forms of art and music are rightly called beautiful, and some are justly condemned as ugly. And if you're tempted to object at such an assessment, you should remember that some art movements are designed to reject beauty and actually be ugly. Their purpose is to mock good art and traditional culture. So to simply take them at their word and affirm their intentions, it's not some sort of unfair assessment. It's just telling them what they've already told us about their art. Sacred music, according to church teaching, is supposed to portray the beauty and splendor of God. It's supposed to lift our hearts and our minds to the divine and encourage us in prayer. And in the case of these villagers in the clip I'm about to show you, that's the exact effect it has on them. So before I say any more than that, let me share a clip of them reacting to the music.
बहुत मधुर आवाज है, गजब की आवाज। बहुत सुकून मिला क्या लोग कहते हैं कि संगीत दिल को जोड़ने वाला है काम। वही संगीत सुनकर ऐसा लगेगा कि भगवान से जोड़ने वाला काम हो रहा है। संगीत सुन के ये सब भगवान से एकदम जुड़ा हुआ लो लग गई हो।
What this reminds me of is that Gregorian chant and other forms of appropriate sacred music, they intuitively sound like prayer. Pop music doesn't sound like prayer. Folk music doesn't sound like prayer. Rock music doesn't sound like prayer. Why? Because none of those forms were designed with prayer in mind. They have an entirely different pedigree, a different purpose, a different telos, which is usually revelry or festivity, which is fine and good when used for such purposes, but when it's imported into the sanctuary of God, where the aim is to worship Him, it tends to compete with that intention. And maybe not for everybody, maybe you're someone for whom it has a different effect. But for someone like me, it actually prevents me from praying, which is the sole thing that I've come to church to do. In other words, it's unwelcoming to people like me, and I'm not alone in that. But I'd wager that for the vast majority of people, they don't find Gregorian chant and polyphony distracting from prayer, unless there's something wrong with them. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the vast majority of people like or enjoy chant. I'm saying it doesn't distract them from prayer. And this point I'm trying to make is strongly apparent if you remove the lyrical content from rival forms. If you remove the lyrics from Gregorian chant, it still sounds like prayerful music, because that's its sole purpose. If you remove the lyrics from praise and worship, it could be anything. It could be a Bon Jovi ballad, it could be a U2 single, or it might be a theme song designed to sell cartoon toy ponies.
My little pony.
Even the most hardened heart can admit that chant is prayerful, whereas praise and worship, I would at least say it's polarizing in that regard. Some people find it prayerful, while others, like me, find it the opposite. So why would we ever use the polarizing option over the more universally recognized prayerful option? And again, that's what's so interesting about this reaction video, because they neither have a horse in this race or a prejudice to bring to the table. They simply react to it for the first time and can't help but be moved by its intrinsically divine nature. Just listen to the things that they say in the video. They say things like, "This is heartwarming music." They say, "This music feels like it is connecting me with God," as if absorbed in devotion to God. They are conveying their request to God by this music. And at another point, one of them says, "I got absorbed in the devotion of God along with those people." And remember, they don't know what the lyrics are, but they know that whatever they're singing about, it's a prayer to God. And there are clips of them listening to other forms of music on the channel, and they never have this same kind of reaction to it. They enjoy the other music, but they respond to it as you'd expect them to. When they listen to a jazz song, they bounce in their chairs and they laugh. They never once mistake it for prayer. It's so easy to watch the guy on the right and to enjoy seeing his reaction, because he's so animated and willing to express what he's feeling. But the guy on the left is actually my favorite, because you can tell he's trying to play it cool. He's got his arms crossed for a good portion of it, but there are several moments where he can't help but be moved by what he's hearing. Another telling insight comes from studies that have been done to measure the effect of music on people and animals. For example, one study measured the differing effects of classical and rock music on dogs that are boarding in a kennel. With the rock music, the dogs were agitated and barking a lot. With the classical music, they calmed down and spent a lot of the time sleeping, which for anyone who's ever boarded their dog at a kennel knows, that's a rare thing. My dog used to always lose his voice from barking at the kennel so much. Another study discovered what became known as the Mozart effect on students, where they measured their intellectual faculties after listening to different kinds of music. The students who listened to Mozart performed noticeably better than the students who listened to other genres. And another similar test was performed on lab rats, in which they were exposed to different forms of music and then tested for their ability to navigate a maze. The music included Nirvana's In Utero album, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's very heavy, very chaotic sounding, a Mozart's piano sonata, a minimalist modern composition, and also white noise and silence. The result was that the Mozart group completed the maze in what they said significantly faster and with fewer errors than the other test groups. Now, some people will say that this is just a matter of preference. Like, I should be able to choose what I want to listen to while driving in my car, and so should you, and neither is right or wrong, which is fine for something as inconsequential as what you listen to in the car. That's valid, to a degree. But that's not what's at stake here. We're talking about what is fitting for worship of God, which is why it can't be about personal preference. It has to be about what best lifts our hearts and minds to God, as a matter of justice even, as the preface in the Mass says. It also has to be about what brings community together for a common purpose. And what could be more divisive than using personal, individualistic tastes as the galvanizing ingredient? You can't be more incoherent than that. And the thing about sacred music is that it isn't designed with personal preference in mind. It's meant to transcend competing tastes. Modern radio-friendly genres of music are designed to solely appeal to particular tastes. They're designed for the consumer marketplace. Sacred music is designed solely for worship, and chant has always been the unique expression used by Christians until we became so infatuated with mass-produced consumer market music that we began to infringe on the sacred with it. And if they didn't know when they started doing that, we should know by now that that has been a failed experiment worth moving on from. Can I ask you to stick around for one extra minute? Because if you enjoyed that, well, first of all, thanks for watching. But now I could really benefit from your help, which you can do in a couple of ways. You can check out my sponsor, Real Estate for Life, who is a network of pro-family real estate agents that can connect you with one in your area. So if you're looking to buy a home, check them out at realestateforlife.org. And if you can help out directly financially, I tend to trust that most of my regular viewers can afford to drop a $5 tip in my jar once a year. And if they did, I wouldn't have to worry about the financial viability of this effort. So if you do want to support, you can go to brianholdsworth.ca/support or join me in my locals community to get exclusive content and chances to interact with me and members of the like-minded community at brianholdsworth.locals.com.